Hi, this is Matt Paulson. Today we're going to look at a video about the history of Sudan and the conflict and the refugees. What organizations are helping the most on Sudan? Let's check.
A revolution started to spread throughout Sudan. After decades of living under President Omar Bashir's brutal military regime, civilians pushed back. A few months later, this man and this man helped take down Bashir in a coup, and then promised protesters the future they had demanded. 4 years later, the same two men are now at war with each other, tearing Sudan apart, killing hundreds of civilians. So, in 2003, while large portions of the army were tied up in the south, rebel groups attacked troops in this city in Darfur.
And Bashir, in recognizing that this rebellion was taking place, instead of relying on the Sudan armed forces or SAF, the conventional military, he instead decided to rely and arm local Arab militias in the region that were known as the Janjaweed.
This group was brutal and focused on wiping out Darfuri rebels and civilians at Bashir's direction. Satellite imagery shows that the Janjaweed is likely responsible for destroying over 3,000 villages. SAF troops in Darfur were responsible for destruction there as well. Both groups are accused of mass killing, rape, and the targeted displacement of civilians. Together, they killed thousands of Darfuris. But there is one particular Janjaweed leader that Bashir trusted the most, Mohammed Hamdan Dagalo, or Hemeti.
Bashir called him my protection, particular play on the Arabic word Himayti, which is my protection versus Hemeti, which is his nickname.
To maintain the RSF's loyalty, Bashir gave Hemeti financial autonomy and allowed him to take control of some of Darfur's gold mines, smuggle weapons and minerals into places like Chad and Libya, and send troops into war-torn regions in exchange for money. At the same time, Bashir continued to let the SAF have a hand in major industries like weapon production and telecommunications.
Protests broke out in 2018 amid a really bad economic crisis.
That's when Bashir faced his biggest challenge, putting his protection scheme to the test. The ultimate trigger was the government's budget, which allocated about 60 to 70% to the security sector, while Sudanese people struggled for basic needs. This led to the biggest revolution in Sudan's history.
Spontaneous protests broke out in different parts of the country, and then they shifted to Khartoum, in the capital city.
Bashir refused to leave office and cracked down on the protesters who ultimately wanted democracy. SAF commanders colluded with the RSF's Hemeti and removed Bashir from power. Protesters celebrated Bashir's removal, but they didn't trust the men who made it happen. A day after the coup, Abdel Fattah Burhan, a former regional commander in Darfur, took charge of the SAF. Together, the two men gained control of Sudan.
People saw them as complicit in the violence in Darfur all those years ago, where they worked together, one as a member of the Sudan Armed Forces, one as a militia leader.
And soon, the two men turned on protesters. When pro-democracy protests kept intensifying in Khartoum, Hemeti and his forces started cracking down. On June 3, 2019, the RSF killed over 100 people at a sit-in protest, and other massacres continued throughout the country. In this plan, the military would have control for 21 months and civilians for 18. That meant the military would eventually have to hand over power to civilians to run the country. After another year of protests, the US, UAE, Saudi Arabia, and the UK pressured Burhan Hemeti and protesters to sign another deal, promising a new civilian-led transitional government by April 2023. But these two men disagreed on a key part of the deal. The RSF would need to become part of Burhan's army, which would limit Hemeti's power. And that disagreement caused a big rift between Burhan and Hemeti, which led to the current conflict between the two men. They've placed hundreds of thousands of armed men across the country. Burhan and his army have an air force that's responsible for many of the casualties, and Hemeti's finances allow him to arm more and more men on the ground. Hundreds of civilians have been killed already, and thousands have fled Sudan.
Political stalemate, but who is helping aid to Sudan? Let's see. There's UNICEF, IRC, Doctors Without Borders, CARE, and Catholic Charities. Who is really helping the most? World Food Program, CARE, the Sudanese Red Crescent Society, owned by the Red Cross, and Save the Children and Project Hope. And is the current aid enough? Let's check. My AI computer says no. Which countries are the biggest contributors? Let's check. Did you guess? United States, and the European Union comes in second, and Germany comes in third. United Kingdom comes in fourth, and fifth is United Arab Emirates. And who's causing this crisis? Who's making it worse? Let's check.
This arid northern part of Sudan is primarily Arab Islamic, the single largest ethnic and religious group in the country who dominate its military and political institutions. The greener central and southern parts are home to Christians and a plethora of other ethnic and religious groups. The man who achieved peace was Jafar Nenyeri, a former colonel who ran a strict one-party socialist state. Incredibly, he managed to keep Sudan's many factions from fighting, surviving another 3 coups along the way until 1983, when he attempted to impose Sharia law. This caused the South's non-Muslim groups to revolt again, beginning another 20-year civil war.
Is there anything that we could really point to that caused the civil war and the fleeing civil population? Sure, there are 6 things that we can really point to. There's violence, suppression of the democracy protests. We can look at the sectarian and intolerance of non-Muslim majorities. We can look at the intense foreign interference from Russia and Iran. We can look at the government mismanagement. We can look at the 36 years of drought they had. And then we can look at the rise of terrorist Islamic groups within the country. Really solid things that have driven the country into chaos, poverty, and then, of course, civil war, which makes for refugees.